that team's not losing to anybody on a football field.
You were almost positive that Goose Creek was going to win the state championship that year.
There was no one going to stand in front of us and beat us, and we were going to go 15-0 and win another state championship.
That was the best football team in the state of South Carolina, and those kids did nothing wrong.
What I've got to say can't be on camera.
It still hurts me to this day.
The first practice of the 2012 high school football season. For the Goose Creek Gators, anything less than a state championship is a disappointment. The Gators, entering their 11th season under the leadership of Chuck Reedy, a former head coach at Baylor and assistant at Clemson in South Carolina. Reedy took over the Goose Creek football program in 2002, 1 year after a winless season for the Gators.
You know, I was looking for a high school job. I had coached high school football prior to getting into college football. I really enjoyed the idea of being able to, you know, have an impact on their lives. I didn't think anything about the fact that they weren't very good. That was irrelevant to me at that point.
He's a name in the state from his time at Clemson, from his time at South Carolina. He's already a name. People knew who he was. People trusted him. People wanted their kids to play for Chuck Reedy.
He got more kids involved. He got involved in the community and got people excited about Goose Creek High School football again. And he's really made a change of what Goose Creek High School football was all about.
Over the course of a decade, the Gators start to win more and more, and Reedy turns Goose Creek into one of South Carolina's premier high school football powerhouses. December 3rd, 2011, 10 years after taking over at Goose Creek, Reedy has the Gators playing in the state championship game for the first time in school history. The Gators pull away in the fourth quarter to win the game and celebrate a moment 10 years in the making.
I told him today, I said, you know, we've talked for 10 years. Play tough, physical, hard-nosed, and play with great effort for 48 minutes. I said, if you do that, we'll win the football game. And, you know, and they did that.
Man, it feels good, man. 20 years from now, we're going to come back to Goose Creek, and they say we won a championship for the first time ever. So I'm just happy we didn't make history.
Even though the year before we won the state championship, I think the 2012 team was certainly the most talented.
Coach Reedy came in and he talked to us, and he was like, guys, we had a special year last year, but that was last year's team. This year's a new team, and we have one goal, and anything less than that one goal is a failure.
We were very talented, very skilled at almost every position, and we just got the job done each and every night.
We had no close games, really. I mean, most of our scores were 40, 50 to 7 or whatever. I mean, we really weren't challenged a whole lot.
You were almost positive that Goose Creek was going to win the state championship that year. The powerhouse team that they had. I mean, you had a guy like Trammell Terry on that team. They were so good.
There was no one going to stand in front of us and beat us, and we were going to go 15-0 and win another state championship.
We gave everybody the opportunity to play. That's one thing. We never, you know, we didn't cut anybody. Anybody that wanted to come out, we allowed to come out. Justice Rogers, he came to us in the summer. He had transferred over from Berkeley and just came in one day and said he wanted to play football. That's fine. He was a nice-looking young man.
We put him in the games a few times when we were up like 40, 50 points. Had to literally tell him where to line up at, to stand here. We just put him in the game so he felt good about himself, and he would get in the game and he would have a smile from ear to ear.
It was a real good feeling. Being out there on the field, lights going, shoot, pads clacking. Oh yeah, it felt good.
He didn't have to. He never touched the ball. He never even touched a person. He got out, but to be on that field, it made him full of joy, and it made us all happy.
Coach Reedy and the staff had this young man on there because it was good for this young man to be a part of the program.
Rogers reached out to Goose Creek boys basketball coach Blake Hall, asking to join the basketball team. In mid-November, as Hall was checking player eligibility, he noticed something different on Rogers' transcript.
The one I saw at the time, seemed odd. It seemed different.
The transcript that we got during the summer, it did not indicate any issues at all. There were no problems.
The first one had nothing on there that it was a fifth-year player or anything like that, but the new one had been updated.
When I brought that to the attention of the administration, I wasn't even thinking about, oh, this young man's on the football team and this might affect them. I was just checking to see if he could play basketball.
When you count on here, this is the 5th year in high school, and then that person told me, said, well, that person playing football right now. And so at that time, I had to do what is the right thing because I've now been brought to me.
He immediately calls the high school league. We're going to self-report.
Because I thought it would help our case even more that as soon as we found out about it, that we reported this case.
Principal Husky overreacted. I mean, if he'd have just chilled out just a minute, we'd have been able to see what the problem was, and then we could have addressed it in a different way instead of, immediately saying, hey, we're guilty, which we really weren't. Because of that, we were immediately to be disqualified because we had an ineligible player.
I felt kind of hurt for them because I didn't, come to Goose Creek to stop players from playing football.
And somebody called me and said, Goose Creek's out. And I said, what? And I don't think any of us had even known that this was an issue. I don't think any of us knew it was something that was being looked at.
We were very devastated. It's probably one of the hardest things I've ever did in my life. And so at that time, after talking with the district office and talking to Coach Reedy, we decided that we need to try to present our case to the high school league.
We went before the executive committee.
We presented our facts and everything that went into this case, how many minutes this young man had played, what the scores were in all these games that he was there.
They asked us, we wanted to either do this or that. I can't remember the two options, but it was basically both of them were kind of going to favor us and give us an opportunity to keep playing. So we said, can we step outside and discuss what we want, what it is we're going to ask you to do for us. When we went outside, people from the high school league office, they said, y'all are going to win. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, everything was very favorable, to what we had presented. Then we get ready to go back in, and they say, well, you can't come back in. We're in executive session. Well, Jerome Singleton, who had declared us disqualified, he hadn't said anything until we left, but now he's discussing this with the executive committee.
I do not know what the executive committee talked about at that time. I do not know what Mr. Singleton said to them at that time or what the attorney said at that time. But I do know that the climate changed when we went back in. When
they finally told us to come back in, it was their whole attitude had changed, their whole demeanor had changed, and now, no, they sided with Jerome Singleton.
I don't know what happened, but I do know the mood changed, and I ain't saying anybody said anything or did anything because I can't prove that. But I do know the mood changed. We went back in there and became more combative with us and them at that time.
Multiple attempts were made to get comments from Commissioner Singleton. He was unavailable for comment. The executive committee overwhelmingly votes to uphold Singleton's decision. Season over. Coach Reedy furious.
What I've got to say can't be on camera. I was very angry, but I was more upset then because it was obvious to me Jerome Singleton is the one that orchestrated that. We were going to win the appeal.
They came back and did that press conference at Goose Creek High School, and it got pretty emotional there as well.
It's done. We spent the whole summer in 100-degree heat, and the fact that some people that never had to deal with that and the sweat and the tears that we put into this team gets the final say in our season.
Sometimes right doesn't prevail. Sometimes things don't go the way that they're supposed to go.
We didn't know, but that was going to be our last time that we could ever play, For some of us ever play, down a football again.
What am I going to tell these young men who have worked so hard and have put so much into this over a technicality, over something that they had nothing to do with?
Goose Creek's fight would not end two local state senators, Paul Campbell and Larry Grooms, reach out to Ken Harrell of the Joy Law Firm, asking him to help.
And really, my first reaction was, look, I want to find out what the facts are first, because I didn't want to commit to getting involved in something. And then once I looked into it, my fault being, hey, maybe this punishment is right. But the more I learned about what had happened and why they were being suspended from the playoffs, the more I realized they really were getting screwed.
The Joy Law Firm shows up, out of the blue, and we didn't contact them. Kenny Harrell, they decided they would take it upon themselves to represent us.
The morning of Friday, November 16th, just hours before the second round of the playoffs kicks off, Goose Creek takes their case to court.
I felt like we were at a football game. The place was packed.
The amount of people that were in that courthouse and trying to get into that courthouse, it was like a StubHub ticket, trying to get into a courthouse in Moncks Corner.
It affected three teams, really. It affected us and our kids. It affected Conway High School, who'd been practicing as well because they were told they were now in. And it affected Bluffton, who was also sitting there, who was supposed to host Conway that Friday night. So it affected a lot of different people.
I guess the best way to describe it is I felt like a human yo-yo all week long.
That's frustrating, just not having a fair advantage to prepare.
What the handbook says that in order for a young man 4 years of high school to start, he has to physically enroll and attend a high school.
My senior years, when I came into Goose Creek High School, I didn't have nothing but 4 years of high school total.
He was in a reform school in Greenville, and he was taking classes from Woodruff High School, but he never set foot in Woodruff High School.
This kid still had quarters or eligibility left if you just look at the facts.
The judge had read the handbook, and he knew what it said, and he knew that we should be allowed to continue to play, that we had not committed a violation.
Judge Young, who presided over that hearing, I think very correctly, as we looked at the law, said, listen, you still are going to have to go back to the high school league because under South Carolina law, they're going to be the final decision maker in this.
Let Goose Creek play, but then you're going to have to go back before the executive committee on Monday and let them review what we have, which really was new evidence.
And then they will just have to live either on the field tonight for the rest of their season or await what the league's decision is next week.
1 o'clock hit and everybody's at lunch. And you hear one person just scream out, "We playing tonight!" Everybody checking their phone, and the whole courtyard just was in an uproar. Everyone's excited, jumping on each other. We better play tonight, We're just so excited. It's just, I can't explain the feeling of that being granted to us, being able to play.
I remember running alongside Chuck Reedy trying to get a soundbite on his way to the car. He was so focused on preparing for that game because there had been no preparation at all.
And now we have an opportunity to play and let things be decided on the field. That's all we've asked all along, and I'm just appreciative the judge made the right decision.
He got back and said, guys, we suiting up, be ready to play. The atmosphere was wild, man. You couldn't even hear yourself think out there. Everyone was there, and the emotions were just running hot.
There was that cloud hanging over our head, and there was the unknown in that we knew we were going to have to go back before the committee on Monday.
The emotion of that week boiled over in that game, and it was a lot of tears on that sideline. People were just excited to be playing.
They were so emotionally drained. We played very well in the beginning, and then we really run out of gas. Because it had been a draining week for them.
We slopped around a little bit against Bluffton, but I understood that with the mental strain that we'd been under all week.
Your final score, Goose Creek 35, Bluffton 25.
To come out of the game with a win, it's like, man, it's just one more step in the road. It's just some adversity hit us, but there's nothing gonna be able to stand in our way.
I give a lot of credit to Bluffton. They played very, very well. Obviously, we didn't play our best football, and just very, very, very happy to be able to play, number one, and very happy to get a win and be able to move on to the third round.
Monday at 2 o'clock, your Goose Creek Gators will be meeting with the South Carolina High School League. Again, Goose Creek High School, hold your heads high.
I thought after we were ruled back to play, Bluffton that Friday night, I thought we were good, thought we were going to be back in. Okay, we went to court. It was proven that we did nothing wrong. It was proven by the judge.
I was hoping we would get a fair hearing. Everything we did was by the rules.
You know, because we had gone to court and we had challenged their authority, there was no way. You couldn't even get them to look you. You know, I'm up there speaking, and you can't, and they're looking down because they wouldn't give you eye contact because they knew they weren't even going to consider what we said.
The high school league had made a stance and said if we bend for you, we're going to have to bend for others, and a rule is a rule, and you knew what the rule was.
All opposed to this motion, please like sign.
I don't see any way that any objective group of people could have heard those facts and decided that that football team should have been suspended from the high school playoffs.
These are people who are supposed to have integrity. You know, these are people that you're supposed to look to and say, hey, they can make a fair decision. They couldn't, you know, and I spoke with several of them afterwards, and they were embarrassed. They knew what they did was wrong. I don't have anything to say right now. Y'all were in there, you heard it. The group has a lot of sympathy and a lot of mercy, don't they?
It was a very difficult day and one of the hardest days I had because I knew that was the best football team in the state of South Carolina, and those kids did nothing wrong.
Whether Goose Creek broke a rule or Chuck Reedy broke a rule or not, it had nothing to do with those kids. And I think that's what I felt the worst about was those kids, the kids on that team, they did nothing wrong. They had, you know, there was nothing that they did wrong, those kids. They didn't know anything about it.
They took it from us, man, and it still hurts me to this day.
Knowing it was me, I couldn't cry as much as everybody else. You know what I'm saying? So I guess it was like more of a dang, you know, like it's because of me this is happening.
I remember talking with his mother and her talking about, you know, what a stressful experience this was for him, because something that was so positive is suddenly turned into something that has to be a nightmare for a kid that, hey, you're getting your entire football team is getting kicked out of the playoffs because of you.
And I didn't want that young man to feel like it was his fault, because I'm sure he was uneducated and wasn't aware that he was in any shape ineligible, or he probably wouldn't have put himself in that situation.
Yeah, he welcomed me on as a manager. I used to travel with the team back and forth, watch them practice, wishing I was on the court. You know, that's my love, basketball. I love basketball.
I thought it was the right thing to do, and enjoyed having him. You know, in whatever capacity we had him, we just, you know, had him around the team and make him feel like he was part of the family no matter what.
As the executive committee, I was the 4A president at the time. I had to go to the state championship game. I had to present the trophies to the team that we would have played in the state championship. But it was very difficult inside. It was very difficult because I knew my kids should have been on that field playing for that state championship. I got voted out the very next meeting.
I remember us crying our eyes out. And we all went through that together, and we all said, man, no matter what, we always gonna stick together. We always got each other's back, no excuses. And to this day, I can call on any of those guys, man, if I need anything.
I don't want the high school league's decision, as unjust as I think that it was, I don't want that to be the final thing that those kids remembered about that season. A local video production company produced a nice video kind of chronicling how great that season was. You know, each of the kids got basically championship rings.
We had done nothing wrong. We tried to hide nothing from anybody. Nobody called us, nobody reported us. We self-reported, so people in this community respected that. And so a lot of people gave money to help get those rings.
I credit the Joy Law Firm and a number of our legislators who were very supportive of us as well, came together and wanted to recognize this team for what they had accomplished.
They came back and they got us rings with integrity on it, and it meant a lot. It meant a lot that someone still cared about us.
Just to get the, applaud I got from everybody that was in the gym, I felt good. And then to see how the ring looked, it felt even better.
Goose Creek made a proposal that totally changed the way the high school league deals with these kind of issues.
Now it can be something that can be a fine, it can be certain things. It doesn't have to be just this. But it's unfortunate that it took our situation to go through, that we had to be the driving force behind this.
I guess it's good for the high school league now that they don't do that, because that was very unfortunate. It was very unfortunate. I would hate to see someone else go through that. I wish it could have changed sooner, but it's definitely something that needed to be changed. Definitely something that needed to be changed.
No other school, no other young men will ever have to suffer like our kids did for something that was at the very least minor, but in our opinion was not a violation at all.
Even though the outcome was not right for us, and I don't agree with what happened to us, and I don't agree that we went through that, but again, if I had that same opportunity, then what kind of person am I going to be if I sit there and say, no, I'm not going to tell anything on this? I can't do that.
If we'd have just looked at it and maybe looked at it a little bit more ourselves before we reported it, then we would have known that there was not a problem. But we started off saying, okay, we're going to self-report, even though we didn't have all the facts. That was a mistake.
Nothing was actually wrong, but we self-reported. We saw something that might be wrong. We self-reported it, and what happened happened. We could have not reported it, and we'd have been state champions to this day. You know what I'm saying? And when we reported it, and we did the right thing, and that's one thing that this whole thing taught us. Every time you do the right thing might not be done back to you, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't do the right thing.